Hello, everyone. I am going to record essentially a module of me just kind of going through a presentation that I created on, I guess, what I'm calling image of the child. And so, if I know many of you have studied this in your coursework at ETSU, and if you are aware of the Reggio inspired approach, you've probably already heard that one of the kind of fundamental principles of this way of working with children um, has a lot to do with the image of the child, the teacher's conceptualization of who children are, and kind of how we partner with them in the classroom and in their learning. So I don't know if any of this even will be new content. For many of you, this will probably be stuff that you have already heard in some context before. But I think it's really important when I'm working with programs to kind of come at it from the really foundational stuff first and foremost so that we can develop a shared philosophy, a shared language, a shared kind of approach to our work with children. So with that, I am gonna share my screen and I'm just gonna kind of talk through this presentation as it rolls. There will be some points in it where we probably pause. Maybe I will I don't know. I'll think through that as it comes. But yeah, like I said, image of the child. I really want to talk about how we believe and what we believe about young children, and how that influences our classroom practice. So, why am I beginning with beliefs? It's because I believe that what we think and what we believe about children influences what we expect to get out of them. And in turn, what we are expecting influences how we engage and how we interact with children. And how we do that, our interactions and our engagement with children really has a lot to do with children's experiences in the early childhood classroom. So, these beliefs that we hold about children, I'm arguing here that they are really the foundation of our practice. They're going to guide the way that we plan our classroom curriculum, the way that we plan our environments and our spaces and our materials, even the way that we facilitate our routines, right? The way that we are diapering and toileting children and our transitions in and out of the classroom, our meal times, our conversations, all of these things that we do daily with young children communicate something about what we believe. Have you ever noticed how two adults can respond completely differently to the same child? And why is that? It's because of the personal beliefs and the image that we ourselves hold about children. And so I kind of want to preface all of this by just saying that this is not about getting it right or doing anything, right or wrong in the classroom. I really just want to heighten our awareness around what are our beliefs about children, in the hopes that we can sort of, work together towards creating a shared vision. What does this program think and believe about children, and how then does that influence the way that we engage in our classrooms? So, when you think of children or a child, what are the words that come to mind? I've given a couple of examples here on this slide, but I want to challenge you to take 30 seconds, a minute, and just jot down some ideas. What are the words that come up for you when I ask this question? What do you think of when you think of a child? And there's again no right or wrong answer here. This is really just about being honest. And you can see from this list that it's kind of a mixed bag, right? There are often, I think, mixed and conflicting feelings. For example, we can see children as both capable and also needy. Those two things can exist at the same time within us. And so I really want you to just kind of think and maybe write down again whatever comes up for you when you're asked this question. Um, I should say this now, probably. My goal is to have each of you go through this, and then to have a follow-up like debrief meeting where we kind of talk some of these things out. So I would love if you can bring your notes when there are these little reflection points or questions that you're asked. I just think that will help us have a more informed conversation together after the fact. All right, so where did these beliefs come from for you? They can come from our own upbringing and childhood, oftentimes the way that we ourselves were educated, the culture in which we grew up or the culture in which we exist currently, the rules, assessments, expectations of the program, right? You all are working within certain parameters, and you have certain, expectations and guidelines that you're trying to accomplish or work within every day. So certainly those are going to be of influence. I think stress and burnout of the job, this work is tricky and challenging and emotionally exhausting some days, right? And so all of these things can be factors in what influences what you think and believe about children. What do you think has shaped you the most? If you're reflecting on where do my beliefs come from, you know, what has had the biggest impact on how you feel and believe about children? And I also want to just say here that beliefs are learned over time and they are not fixed, right? So if you have something coming up that is maybe challenging you a little bit in the way that you think about children or think about what you believe, um, there's always opportunity to shift and move these things within yourself. All right. So really getting into the Reggio inspired image of the child, or what is the Reggio view of who children are? It's really about children being capable and competent. And it's a kind of a shift, I think, for most of us in terms of thinking about how children learn and how they communicate. All right. I'm going to talk in just a second about these kind of two world views that I think oftentimes, again, we sometimes can hold space for both of them within ourselves. But the Reggio inspired view is really going to shift us more to the strengths based view of children. Um, and it's really about understanding that children come into the world ready to learn, ready to explore and engage and ask questions. And they don't necessarily need us to give them information. They are capable of drawing that information out of their environments, out of the materials that they engage with, out of other people and conversation and interaction, right? So here are the kind of two images that we often hold. The first is, I'm going to refer to it as a deficit image, right? This is the idea that children have needs that we as adults are there to manage. We are caring for them. That children are not quite ready yet to be independent and take, initiative and autonomy in the world. They instead are dependent on adults to give them, again, experiences, information, um, to help them move through their days, right? And this view of children, really, this deficit image sees behaviors as problems to be solved, issues, right? Challenges. Um, if we shift our thinking just a little to this more strengths-based image of the child, what we have here is the idea that children are naturally, again, capable, curious, competent individuals who can come into a classroom or an experience, and they can take from it what they need, right? We understand that children are born as learners. So even the very youngest infant has things, experiences, ideas. They are kind of coming into life with questions, curiosities, things to explore and unpack on their own, not with the help of an adult kind of spoon feeding it to them, right? We see children in this lens as rational and expressive. So they are thinkers. They're able to tell us what they're thinking. They're able to show us what they're thinking. That's that expressive piece. Children don't always have the language or the vocabulary, experience, whatever, to clearly articulate their thoughts and ideas to us. But the Reggio inspired view of the child would say that if we provide them with the right materials, the right environment, the right experiences, that they can, in fact, show us much, much more than we probably would give them credit for out of the gate. And this view, I think it's really important to note this view is where we see behavior as communication, right? So we understand that even challenging behaviors, even problematic behaviors that feel as though we need to solve them, they are the child communicating something important to us. And, when I'm talking about this behavior piece in particular, I think it's kind of easy to see that when we view behaviors as problems for us to solve only, and we do not see them as the child communicating something important that we need to receive and understand from them, that creates a situation where, we're trying to fix the child or fix the issue rather than understand really what's going on and how can we help kind of navigate the situation, right? So as I'm talking about these things, think for yourself, which one of these is the image that shows up for you when the day is going well, right? When all the parts are working the way they're supposed to and all the people are in their places. Most of us probably do hold this strengths-based image. That's why you're working with children, right? There are things about children that I'm sure you would agree with on this side of things. However, which side shows up for us when the day gets challenging, right? When the people are not where they're supposed to be and it feels like, your hair's on fire as you're running around just managing chaos, right? It's trickier to have that strengths-based image of the child. And so what I would say to this is just that the more aware we are of our thinking and kind of our position in all of this, the more able we are to access this strengths-based lens when it gets tricky and challenging in the classroom, right? It's a practice. And so, again, this conversation is really just intended to help us all sort of start thinking more about these beliefs that we hold and how they influence what we do with children on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so this is the piece where I'm kind of going to chunk it out, infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. And I'm not going to talk through each piece of this, I guess, mostly for the sake of time and just I want to keep it really relevant to where you all are at in your center. So I'm going to invite you to move through this by thinking through these prompts, right? We have what do we believe about infants if we see them as capable communicators and competent individuals, right? Um, and I have two infant videos, one embedded here and one here that if you are working with infants, I would love for you to watch these two videos. They're pretty short. It'll take you less than 10 minutes. And I want you to be thinking about the questions and considerations given to you on these two slides. I may have to email the links because I'm not sure if you'll be able to access them through this module, but it'll be a little trial and error to figure out how this all works. But I'll make sure you have access to these two videos and we'll go from there. Okay, so infant caregivers watching these two videos, and again, just jot down some notes, think through, and we'll have a follow-up conversation specific to the interactions and observations that you have from these infant videos. Same thing for toddlers. Okay, so if we believe toddlers to be capable, competent makers of meaning in their little worlds, then there are certain behaviors, experiences that toddlers are going to bring to the table. And I have a video here that speaks to a lot of these. I want you to watch this if you're working with, any of those younger toddlers, older toddlers, twos, maybe even in the 3-year-old classroom, depending on what you think. But I also have one for preschool, so the 3, 4s, and 5s. That might be the most appropriate fit for you guys. So again, watch the video, think through strategies that you see the teacher engaging in using with this child, and make some notes for us to talk about after. And finally, for preschool. So preschoolers, we believe that they are thinkers, again, making sense of the world through their play. So I have a prompt, some questions here to think about, and a short video here for you guys to watch. Okay. For all of us, I think that considering how children and our beliefs about children, what does what we believe about children, how does that show up in the spaces that we create for them, right? So the environment, our classrooms are going to reflect and communicate what we believe about children, whether we mean for them to or not. So I want you to think for just a minute about your own classroom, the space that you are working with children in. What do you think it says about children without any words, just how it invites children in, what it invites children to be a part of? What does your classroom say about what you believe about children? I have some examples here from another school that I worked with recently in the past year or so. And this is coming from a preschool classroom. These images that you're going to see, just a few, but I just wanted to show you how their environment, me coming in, it was very apparent to me. First of all, the study, the inquiry that they were doing with children was very clearly focused on animals, and I could see that reflected in their space. So you will notice that they have right here their standard bookshelf, and it has books about all sorts of things: airports, ships, planets, some stories, right? The Billy Goat Gruff and some dinosaur stuff. But then here they have this additional shelf in their reading space where their animal focus was kind of clearly highlighted to me, as well as artwork by a child that was reflecting again this study that they're carrying on about animals, right? And so again, I just want to show examples of how the environment can communicate about children. This is another space in the classroom, their art area, art creation. And so one of the days that I was there, they were working with clay and creating these, clay replicas of different animals. So you can see the materials that they need to work with the clay. You can also see some images laid out on the table to kind of guide the children's thinking. And then you can see the work samples. The children were creating. This was not their first time working with clay, obviously. But again, this setup and these materials being available to the children at all suggests that these teachers trust children to use messy, challenging materials, and they're providing them with realistic images of animals to kind of guide their thinking about what they might create out of clay. This is a picture of a picture, actually. So in this image, you can see the painting created by the child. You can also see how the teacher posted this painting with a photograph that they took of the child creating this painting, right? So they're looking at, again, an image of a tiger. They have a color wheel. They're doing some color mixing. So there's a whole lot of higher level thinking going on the part of the child and on the part of the teacher, right? In the snapshot that I took of the documentation of the child and the artifact that the child created. But again, me coming into this classroom, I see this and it communicates something about, I guess, just the level of it's very intentional on the part of the teacher to guide the child's thinking about colors, about animals, and how they're, documenting and putting this back out into the classroom for other children and families and visitors like myself to see. Final image from this classroom. This was from a journaling prompt. So this is a preschool classroom. The children were invited during their morning transition into the classroom to take their journal. They had a prompt put in at the top that says, "What are the features of your favorite animal?" And the children draw these images in their journals, and then the teachers would sort of go around the table, sit with each child for just a couple of minutes and write down their words as the child dictated what they had drawn, right? So again, there's just a suggestion here that the child's ideas in and of themselves, in answer to this question from the teacher, are valuable, worth writing down. They were shared with one another at a circle time after this morning activity. And so, again, I'm just sharing an example of being able to go into a space and very clearly see suggestions about the image of the child as coming from the environment and the interactions that I was able to observe in this classroom. So again, I'm going to take it back to my question at the beginning. Think about your own classrooms. Where do you have examples of things like this already going on? Where do you have space to, think about how you might bring some of this stuff in? Again, it's about awareness and really just kind of thinking about where you are in all of this in your practice right now. All right. The image of the child and the beliefs that we hold as teachers about children, if we're moving towards this more Reggio inspired, strengths based view of a child, it invites us as the teacher to really shift our role, right? From that deficit approach, children need to be managed and need to be taught explicitly, right? So that's our role. If we're shifting to something different, we can go from manager to researcher, where we're curious and questioning right alongside the children, right? So we become more of an observer. We're watching, we're listening, we're slowing down. We're really inviting ourselves to learn right alongside the children, right? We're co-learners and we become more reflective decision makers. So when I observe or I overhear or I notice something happening in the classroom that piques my interest, my curiosity, makes me go, huh, I wonder why they're doing that. Or I wonder what we could do to get them to do this. That's when I am, reflecting on what's going on in my classroom and I become more able to make effective decisions that are going to guide my planning, my curriculum, my interactions, the materials, all of that stuff is kind of born out of this shift from managing the classroom to researching in the classroom alongside my children. And so I have this question here for you to think about. How comfortable are you or are we with not knowing what's going to come next? I think it's a very common practice, a lot of times born out of necessity, right? We have to have the lesson plans up on the wall. Sometimes we're planning a month in advance, but teacher researchers, and so I really want to challenge you to think about yourself as teacher researcher, the work that you're doing in the classroom alongside children, being more in line with how can I learn more about this thing, this experience with the children, right? Teacher researchers are really more in the practice of doing week to week planning because as things emerge weekly, it's going to shift, what you're doing with the children week by week. I think teacher researchers tend to be more concerned with the process and not as concerned with the product, right? And again, that's a big shift in, early childhood education. We tend to think a lot about milestone development and skill checking things off the list, putting artwork up on the wall for folks to see. These are the things, having the numbers and colors and all the things that we know we're supposed to be teaching children, right? But when we shift to this way of thinking that really puts the opportunity more into the hands of the child, I think we're less concerned with those outcomes. And we begin to really understand that the thinking process and kind of walking through a project or an exploration with the children, that is the outcome, right? If you go through your Tennessee ELDS, the early learning and development standards, you will clearly see how going through, a rich, like the Animals Project, we could go through those pieces, just those four images that I showed you, and we could probably hit 5 to 7 of those state learning standards per image, right? And show how our children doing the things that they're supposed to be doing in early learning in these experiences. And so I think we just become less consumed by developmental assessment and we begin to be more able to um, just do kind of deeper thinking with children and recognize that as super, super valuable in our classrooms. All right. That's really all the information that I wanted to share with you. So I hope that the videos that you were watching, infants, toddlers, or preschool, I hope that gave you some meaningful things to think about. I also want to challenge you to complete this sentence so that we can discuss it together. Sentence says, I tend to see children as blank, which shows up when I blank, right? Totally up to you, maybe based on what has come up for you through this presentation. Take a couple of minutes, jot down your thoughts. And again, awareness, really honing in on what do I believe? Is it what I wish I truly believed about children? Or is there opportunity to shift? That is the first step in, all of us kind of aligning our practice, right? And then there are small shifts that can make a huge impact. So if something has come up for you as I've talked through this, or as you've done your, thinking through these ideas, if there's something that you would like to make a difference in your practice, think about how you might pause before you intervene with a child to give them again that opportunity to capably and competently handle their own circumstance. So pausing, think about how you might engage with children in such a way that you replace giving them directives with asking them questions, right? So instead of telling children where to go or what to do, you might invite them to come up with their own idea by asking them a question. I think this one is so important to make a shift in your practice where you're moving from documenting behaviors only to think about how you might document children's thinking. This is so, so key to that teacher researcher piece. And I think it's a big shift to make. But if you can think of little ways to move away from just focusing on behavior to thinking about thinking, huge shifts in planning practices. And then this one also really tricky. Sometimes it's like sit on your hands and just 5 extra seconds. Give them 5 extra seconds to figure it out, to work it out, to make the mess, whatever it is, if you can just wait 5 seconds longer, certainly, within the parameters of keeping children safe and well and all the things that we know we have to be doing, right? But again, it's about building that trust. I trust you 5 seconds longer to figure it out, or to try. And I just think these are very little ways that we might be able to um, change our practice to some extent. All right, closing question. So, if we hold this image of the child that says children are capable, then what becomes our responsibility as their teachers? I would love for you to share your thoughts on that with me. And also, this is your exit ticket. I want to hear your answer to this question. One belief that you would like to hold on to within yourself, or a belief that you are gently questioning after this talk. Okay. So I look forward to, again, debriefing with each of you to talk through your reflections and comments and things that have come up from my piece of this. And then also, we're going to focus on those videos and the observation piece. And I will see you all soon. Okay, thanks.